Everyone. Um, I believe the recording has begun. So I
Yes.
guess without further ado, hello everyone. Welcome to the Supernova Foundation seminar. I'm delighted to introduce our speaker, Professor Jessica Dempsey. Professor Jessica is a leading radio astronomer and beginning in 2016, in 2026, forgive me, I'm 10 years early, the Director General of the SKA Observatory. So this is an ambitious international project that builds on the world's largest radio telescope arrays. So Professor Dempsey's research spans the molecular composition of our galaxy, and she was part of the Event Horizon Telescope team that produced humanity's first direct image of a supermassive black hole. So without further ado, I think I will let her take it from here. Professor, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And thank you for having me. I'm really pleased to have an opportunity to talk with you all today. I do have slides, but I'll tell you what I'm going to do is because Anna's already, we started to have a really interesting conversation. And I'd much prefer to have a conversation with you all than sort of just talk at you. So I'm going to throw some slides up, but I hope all that does is sort of stimulate the questions that you might want to ask. And then I'm going to shorten that and come back to you all and just have a chat and understand maybe we can go in any direction. Does that sound sensible for everyone? Okay,
Sounds great. Definitely.
fantastic. What I'm going to try and do is find my keynotes. The inevitable question, can you see my screen?
Yes, indeed. Thank you.
Yes, yes,
Excellent.
yes.
Okay. As some of you were coming in, I described myself to Anna as a soap bubble, in the sense that I've never had a plan. I still don't have a plan. And where I've wandered and ended up in the world, while there are definitely reasons for it, I won't say it's been with a purpose or a direction per se. Although if you see some themes in here and you can let me know why I do the things I do, I'll really welcome any advice on that. And so I call myself an accidental astronomer. Not because being an astronomer isn't a wonderful and amazing thing and an incredible privilege. It's just not where I had pictured myself when I started out, or even, on the day-to-day basis, the thing that I define myself as. And so this is me. I am Australian. My accent's a bit stronger than usual because I just got back for 3 weeks in Australia to sort of scrub up on the accent a bit. But if it sounds blended, that's because I've lived in a lot of places. I spent a lot of time in the United States, for example. Um, but really, this telescope here, which is the Australian Compact Array, which is in the north of New South Wales, that was the first time I got my hands literally on a radio telescope or a telescope of any kind. And I was 19 years old. I was still in my undergraduate. And the reason I maybe stayed in the field or wandered back to the field wasn't necessarily the science, it was the toys. It was being able to play with, to build, to explore what are the capabilities of these incredible pieces of technology actually do. And that will be a theme as well that I love to talk about. But it was a long road to get there. And as an example of some of the things which I've done along that road, um, I was a professional actor and singer. I have had a full degree in theatre and film, for example, but I also am a qualified firefighter as an EMT. I've been a comedy producer. So I've wandered around all of these things. I adore languages. I can speak 1.75 languages at any given time, but that has included over 7 languages now that I'm working on Dutch. So I can get into trouble in quite a few languages, but I can only get out of trouble in a couple, is the way I'd like to describe it. So what's interesting about this, I think, is that it's amazing how broad experiences can play into the places you're going to end up, the ways you can manifest yourself. So don't ever throw out an experience or an opportunity because it's not necessarily fitting into the concept of the career that you might have or the path that you think you might take. I think is the only takeaway. Of course, you're welcome at any point to ask questions about any of this. There's a lot of stories there. But the reason I got enticed away from my theatre and film degree Other than being completely disillusioned, by the way, about theatre and film, I was hanging around with a lot of actors, and actors are assholes. And I was like, is this really who I want to hang around all day, every day? And right at the same time as I was having that kind of early career crisis, um, my professor in astronomy, on the other hand, was like, well, would you like to go down with our first trip down to Antarctica to put the site testing equipment there? And I'm like, cool, that sounds fun. And I had never seen snow before, right? I had never been in actually below zero weather. Did I know what I was getting into? Absolutely not. Probably that is actually a good thing. Ignorance is bliss. And the short story was I dropped my theatre and film degree with about 1 credit to go and found myself only 2 months later at the geographic South Pole. And so I was completely hooked. This was just a complete passion of mine. I spent several years down there building all sorts of different instruments, including a fiber optic spectrometer, which was my PhD. And so we were looking at the high Antarctic plateau for astronomy. It's a really big high ice shelf, and it's actually one of the best sites in the world in terms of certainly looking at the submillimeter and infrared universe. And so this was actually my PhD right here, this on this tower here, and one of these two telescopes here was the one that I built. And it was actually made fully of Invar. It could run on 7 watts of power. And my job was to say, is the Antarctic high plateau good for UV and optical telescopes? Because we knew it was good for submillimeter telescopes. Was it good for this kind? And I will tell you that the answer to my question and my PhD was, it's terrible. It's terrible because it is right under the auroral circle. This is a stupid place to put an optical telescope, and that pretty much is the summary of my thesis right there. So sometimes non-results or negative results are also results. It meant that my first paper coming out of my PhD was not actually in astronomy. It was in an atmospheric physics journal because instead of trying to see that beautiful starlight, all I had done was taken high-resolution spectra of the aurora. So my professor was very adaptive, and he's like, well, you've got some of the best resolution data of aurora ever taken. You may as well publish this. So that's sort of where my thesis ended up. But of course, again, it's not really what your thesis and your PhD does, which should define your career from there. What this had really done is tell me that I was having a great time in Antarctica and could I end up staying there. And so what I did then, I'd done 5 summers in Antarctica by that point, was that I got offered to winter the next year. And this is the experiment, the Viper telescope. It's inside that big funnel there, which is a ground shield to keep the reflections of the sunlight and the moonlight away from the telescope. And I wintered with the cosmic microwave background experiment called ACBAR. So I was 13 months straight at the South Pole. In fact, it's embarrassing, but I have to realize it's 20 years this year. So I started in December of 2004, went through till the end of 2005. And you can see there on the right, that's actually me. I had to drag these dewars of helium and nitrogen up all of those stairs, which are hidden actually at the back of that blue box there. So about 3 flights of stairs that I had to drag 200 kilograms of liquid nitrogen and helium every second day. And what you see there is that's actually liquid helium coming out of that the dewar handle there. The problem is that actually connecting it into the dewar, you have to take your big gloves off. And I had to do that every second day throughout the winter, including in, I think the lowest temperature we had was minus 84. And so I have permanent frostbite in these 3 fingers here because I'm left-handed and I couldn't have them the gloves on. So these are sorts of the downsides of working in these environments. And here is the entire result. And the reason I'm not working in CMB to this day is I never want to see another cosmic microwave background bump in my entire life. Because you see those fields on the sky there? There was 6 fields. I stared at those 6 fields 24/7 for 13 months. And the result there was those 2 blue dots on that famous CMB curve. Those 2 were mine. But I have to I admire every single person who does this kind of work, which hammers down on these kinds of work, but honestly, it bores me to tears. I'm an instant gratification scientist. And so I was offered to do a postdoc at Berkeley to finish these results, and I told them, no, you couldn't possibly pay me enough. So that was the work we were doing down there. This is me here. In fact, we built, so there were only the one upside, downside, depends on which way you look at it, of working in Antarctica is the gender ratio is quite intense. It's usually roughly 10 to 1 at the American bases. So we, in the winter, had only four or five of us in this wintered. We had 75 people and 7 women. So they say the saying that they say to women as you go down to Antarctica is, hey, look, the odds are good, but the goods are odd. Now, the reason I've got some highlighted person here is who I've got there in the middle is a good friend of mine, and she was actually our electrical engineer and cryogenics technician when I was wintering. And at this particular time, she and I both had the same ambition. For various reasons, including changes to the law in the US, I got kicked out of the program, but she didn't. And you can see Christina Koch here, and she has now got the record for the longest time in space of any woman. She did just under 12 months, just over 12 months on the International Space Station. And in maybe as early as February next year, she will be the first woman to orbit the moon. And the reason I bring her up, other than, we just want to fangirl and also I'm deeply jealous, is that Christina and I, at that time, I was the station science leader with a PhD. Christina was an engineer. Now, that in some minds in the National Science Foundation relegated her some weirdly below my authority. And look where she is now, right? There are many paths and directions to the kinds of achievements. And what she did was she just looked at all of the things that she had to tick off in order to get into the program. She and I were doing this through different tracks. I was going through the science track. She was going through the engineering track. And as I said, my rule, I got kicked out because I was not a US citizen. So I stopped at one step in the track. She just kept going, and she just ticked every single box that she needed to do to get where she needed to be. This is just some pics. I actually talked with her on Zoom before she launched. I've never been more terrified for a space launch ever in my life. It just changes your attitude when you have a friend strapped to the solid fuel rocket, let me tell you. So after Antarctica, I wanted to go as far from snow as possible. So I went to Hawaii. I was hired as the JCMT instrument scientist. So this was me going away from academia. I mentioned I never wanted to really sit there and crunch numbers. There are a lot of opportunities to go into these kinds of more technical and operational aspects, and that was always what interested me. And this was some of the science I did. I call myself as an astronomer unfaithful to wavelength, or maybe pan wavelength if we want to be a bit more inclusive. And that means I go and I do the science wherever the instrument that I happen to be building or running is. And that's why, remember, I wandered all the way up to UV, and now I came back down into the submillimeter. And this is part of the survey I did because I accidentally invented an observing mode on the telescope which shouldn't exist. And I basically was working on the telescope, and I said, I think we can run this faster. These scans are taking too long. And they're like, you can't do that with the telescope. It'll fall apart. I'm like, can I just try it? And so because I invented a rapid scanning mode with the telescope, we could make very fast surveys. And they're like, well, what are you going to do with it? I'm like, I don't know. I don't do science in this field. And I just pointed it at the galactic center. And it turns out we had an instrument sensitive enough to take these observations. And this is just an example of the combination between the survey of carbon monoxide that I was doing, combined here with these beautiful images from Herschel in the submillimeter, looking at all of that gas and dust. This is actually my start of my love affair with the center of galaxies, in particular with black holes, because this is actually the loop of gas and dust circling the black hole at the middle of our Milky Way. And that's, of course, maybe some of you have seen this picture. So this is M87, and this was a very, very hard one image that we took with this huge team of over 300 people. And this was just an example of what happens when you do good PR, because we even got a Google cartoon out of it. And this is a snapshot of just a few of the front line images that came out on the front pages of all of these papers around the world. And then, I mean, happy to talk about that if you guys are interested. And then, of course, I was there over a decade in Hawaii. And so then I ended up coming to ASTRON here at the Netherlands. Certainly a change in climate, change in wavelength again. So now we're down in the lowest of low frequencies. I'm like, megahertz. Who does something at megahertz? This is crazy. Incredible facility that we have here. We're running the LOFAR telescope. And I'm really have now been, of course, advocating and working more in science leadership. Was the head of operations at JCMT, and then I was a deputy director, and then, of course, coming to ASTRON here now, I'm the director of ASTRON. And now I find my focus, other than just doing the science, is on how do we make astronomy and how do we make the way we interact in our education and our workforce opportunities more accessible, more fair, more of a good experience. My sort of motto, if I was going to have one, is simply we can do good science and be good humans at the same time, and we don't have to sacrifice one for the other. I won't tell you that science leadership is fun every day of the week, but I've chosen to remain here because the only way to shift the needle in terms of people's experience and how we interact with the world is to be in a place where you can actually set policy, where you can be an umbrella for others. And that's sort of why I end up where I'm at. And so I was coming back and I calculated we had a record number of PhDs in my group at University of New South Wales. And I went back and I wanted to look where we all were now. There's only 4 of us that are currently in astronomy. We've got people who've gone into medicine, there are people who've gone into software and programming, big data. We've got a children's book author. My latest papers have been in social science practice, in Indigenous culture and methodologies. I just did a huge collaboration with a visual artist out on one of our telescopes where she basically created a mural that can only be seen from space. I work more in politics now than I do in science. I get to talk with philosophers and social scientists. All of the work I now do is mostly in ethics. I'm a professor of ethics in astronomy and science at the Radboud University. So a lot of my thinking, academic thinking now, is more in terms of our social footprint and our responsibility matrix towards our communities as scientists and in those communities, and what does that mean in practice. So I know this is sort of a random word salad of stuff, but I wanted to just kind of trigger you a little bit to think about the fact that, as I said, I am a soap bubble and I have a short attention span, and I do have this relentless curiosity in all these directions, but that has led me here. And I don't really add a value judgment to any of those things as being more important in getting me here or less, or more value than less. But I find them all come in handy to me in terms of speaking to how I am and how I work and the places I've ended up. So I just wanted to stop there because, as I said, I know that was a lot of random stuff, but I think it's more interesting to me to sort of open the floor to you all and ask you what you'd like to talk about, if anything in there sort of inspired you or concerned you, or any of those emotions, of course, are allowed.
Thank you. It was really amazing. It was a mixture of so many things, but I never thought that someone can have like this kind of journey. It was super cool for me. But maybe it's a cliche question, but I don't know if you heard me and Anna, we were talking at the beginning. Now I am currently at the school, and last night we were all together around and we were talking that because there are some particle physics and cosmologists, and they were like, how were you like in love? What was the story? And then they were like, Oh, okay. And I was saying something about my childhood. And did you have any role model that you wanted to be that? And then I at that time was like, oh, this is something that I should ask you. You had this thing that you just wanted to do fun stuff, and that was your thing. That was the model wherever there is fun stuff and curiosity, or like you had someone in mind, or what do you think about this? It is just my simple, like, naive question, sorry.
No, and I mean it's a good one. I have to admit to you, I haven't had role models, not women, certainly. There weren't any. Or they were, I found out about them later. I'm one of these weird, stubborn idiots who does things without looking. And I found myself as the first of a lot of things. The first woman down there, the first woman, the first woman dumb enough to sign up, all of these sorts of, it just didn't even occur to me till later. And that means that if I'd waited around to look for a role model on a lot of these aspects, I would have been waiting a long time. Later I found what I would call maybe some mentors and some allies and some champions, and I'm talking to a couple of women in the field. One of my, I mean, I'm very fortunate to call her, if not a mentor, then certainly someone I've had a lot of interactions with in the recent years is Jocelyn Belbonell. And she and I, weirdly, even though our careers are 40 years apart, it's really depressing how many of my experiences were the ones she had. And she's frustrated, right? She's like, hang on, wait, so you're still having these experiences 40 years later. And that was a really interesting one for me because then I talked with Meg Urey once about it, and I was giving her a particular problem, and I was dealing with, I mean, the amount of times I just walk into a boardroom and there's 10 or 12 men and me is very common. And I was giving a particular problem, and she's like, "Do you have any allies in the room? Do you have any champions?" I said, "No." And she said, "The problem is being the first of anything, right? You're always therefore having to clear that path for yourself and maybe keep it clear for others." I mean, there's plenty, unfortunately, of examples around not just our field, but others where there are women who pull the ladder up after them, as they say, which is, one of my biggest frustrations, if you like. The thing, I guess what I'm trying to say is I didn't have a woman role model, someone that looked like me in any shape or form. Would it have helped? Yeah, sure. And do I stand out and bring others up to stand out to be role models for others? Yes. But what I sort of say with all of the examples I give you is that role models are all well and good, but don't wait around for someone to tell you that this path that they've chosen is one that's right for you. I think that you can talk yourself out of anything if you try hard enough. On the other hand, asking for permission, never done that in my life. Not going to start now. And I'd much rather encourage people to say, don't do what I did. My goodness, don't do what I did. But do learn the things about deciding what your path is for yourself. You are going to have to self-calibrate at some point. So role models might initiate it, but don't, if you're going to let a lack of role models stop you, then you're going to hit a stopping point at some point anyway.
Yeah, that's so true. Thank you. I give the floor to Anna if you want to ask, please.
Thanks. Thank you. Prof, firstly, thank you for the lovely talk. That was really inspiring and so interesting. And I guess the question I have kind of circles back to our initial conversation about fear.
Mm.
So let's take this first big step, at least to my mind, it seems like a really big step. Taking a position in Antarctica as an Australian, how did you overcome the fear of the unknown in this?
I mean, one of the things is ignorance is bliss. It really is. If I had known just how challenging things were before you go down to do these sorts of things, you probably don't start them, right? So being willing to leap without thinking too hard about some things, sometimes that's the best way to deal with the fear, right? And so I didn't have any idea what I was getting into, but it was one of those sorts of recognitions that come afterwards. I have this deep, and this is talking about fear. What's a fear that drives me? A fear of embarrassing myself. The amount of things I've soldiered on through because I didn't want to like step back because I didn't want to look like a coward or didn't want to be, and that's a useful for me. I weaponize that in myself. It's like, okay, well, if I've stuck, I put myself here, it will be much more embarrassing to back out than it would be to go forward. So I'm just going to do this. And so for me, that was a motivator. Um, but also, when I train people to recognize fear-based decisions in myself. So let's say I had two paths, and I did, right? I had acting in this case in Antarctica. I actually turn into the direction that is most scary.
Hmm.
For me, nearly every time, I will choose the harder path. So that makes me a little perverted, but it's stood me in good stead because usually that fear, that resonance, that frequency of that fear, well, hang on, what are you so afraid of? Right. And so instead of trying to unpack that, I'm like, okay, this thing scares me the most. I'll do that. And it really has never steered me wrong. I'll nearly always end up in the place that has been the most interesting and the most satisfying, even if it has been the hardest. So I use fear as a calibrator, but not to run away from, but to choose the thing which actually probably is going to satisfy me and be the most interesting for me. I know that sounds a bit backwards.
It sounds very daring, choosing the option that forces you to confront your fear. I think
Hmm.
that's an interesting way to live.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Great. Then I guess I cede over to Michelle.
Thanks, Anna. Just thank you so much for taking the time to come and talk to us. Um, I I wanted to touch a little bit on what you said about role models because obviously we're a mentoring program and a big thing that we do is literally find role models for young students. But I think when we give talks or try to give a little bit of training, one of the things I always say is your mentors there could have useful advice, etc. But at the end of the day, you always have to choose your own path. And I think as mentors, a lot of the time, our role, because we're not really like necessarily in the student's career, right? We're not a supervisor or a teacher or whatever. So a lot of the time, what we do is just be a cheerleader and just like go
Mhm.
do it. If you want to do this thing, you can do it, and really just try and support them. So I think that's probably the best thing that you can do as a mentor is just try to encourage. I had a question on your talk. I think is seeing such an unusual career path is truly an inspiration. And incidentally, I also nearly went into acting. I had this choice of physics or drama. And I dabbled in both, but in the end, I decided no, physics is the path for me, and drama was my hobby for a long time. Um, but I think these days, there's so much pressure on like especially postdoc applications and faculty applications and whatever. I think a lot of people are quite afraid of taking a very unusual career
Mhm.
path, and you obviously seized a lot of opportunities that came your way that felt interesting. But um, what advice would you give to, well, anyone really, to kind of find these opportunities? Is it through networks or some other means?
Yeah. Good. Okay. I'm going to quickly come back because I totally agree with you about, look, I am the biggest champion of mentoring that you'll ever hear. I don't consider the question on okay, some distant past role model being the reason for doing something is very
Yeah.
different to my support for mentoring.
Yeah, yeah,
And I
yeah. No,
believe
I understand. Yeah.
and I believe in close age group mentor pairing, right? So
Mm,
it should be, and it's about shared experience and about the fact that you, for someone just slightly younger than you, are going to be a far more useful mentor or a different mentor than I would be for the same person. And I
interesting.
advocate for a range of a spectrum of mentors. My
Mm,
mentors were mostly men in my early career, and that stood me in really good stead. Why? Because I learned to lead like a man.
mm,
I've had to unlearn that, right? And I
mm,
wanted to unlearn that, but at the time it was really helpful for me, right? Because
mm,
then I learned how men think, and I was mostly in rooms filled with men. So cross-gender mentoring, cross-career mentoring, I recommend all of it. You can never have, okay, this is more important. You can never ask for too much advice, but advice is like makeup. I said it's not all appropriate for the same occasion, and you don't want to put it all on the same time.
That's great.
And so with mentoring, you have to learn as the mentee which bits of this are okay, that's not the right advice for me, right? It's as much
Yeah.
about choosing the wrong fit and knowing that and the right time than any of those other things. So I wanted to come back to that because I agree with you,
No, that's brilliant.
role models per
Yeah.
se. So more to your question, right? Where do you find opportunity? This is a question I get a lot, and I know the postdoc system sucks. The attrition rate is both good and bad. I don't disagree with the attrition rate. This is the first controversial thing I say. Why? Because astronomy is a privileged profession, and we don't need a bajillion of us. We should.
Mhm.
Okay, I really strongly believe that. Do I believe that there needs to be equal, balanced representation and representation that reflects our community? And do we throw out our women and our people of color more and our other underrepresented groups? Absolutely. And I fight to the death for that. But I won't fight to the death for everyone. You get a postdoc, you get a postdoc, all
Yeah.
postdoc, because
Mm.
that's not what this system should do. But what we need to be doing earlier for everybody is creating the smorgasbord of opportunities that are there and not making it. And the problem is, most of you hang out with academics. Firstly, I'm sorry about that. But the problem with that is that means you only see the academic route as the one which is the success route. And it's just a selection effect because you're talking to professors, right? Who for them, that was the success route. And so, sort of back instead of, I don't want to use the word role model now, but in terms of seeing other people who have walked into these other professions from astronomy, I don't see them as any more or less successful than the one who stayed an astronomer. And so, what I am interested in is making sure you have those opportunities to look around earlier in some of these career paths. And as an example, we are building the largest radio telescope on the planet in 2 continents. And we are missing about 2/3 of the workforce that I'm going to need to run that organization. Right? We have to scale up our workforce development and we have to stop discarding people earlier. I will take all of those rogue postdocs, right? If you're willing to roll your sleeves up, come out with me and build some antennas and figure out how the hell they work, right? So do you want software? I've got all the software in the world. But these are not traditional academic paths, right? So there's some very specific things going into operational astronomy that you do have to be interested in. But there are a wealth of these other opportunities. So things I say recommend is, instead of going to just academic astronomy conferences, go to a software data one. Wander towards I advocate the SPIE Astronomy Telescopes Conference every 2 years for my up and coming instrument people because you start to socialize not with the academics, but with the engineers. So yeah, don't go entirely necessarily out of the field, but somewhere where there's a Venn diagram of overlap. And see whether it floats your boat. Really, those are the only ways you're going to find those broader sets of opportunities. My thing is, as I said, I'm relentlessly curious. I find it cool to talk with the plumber, about and also, the software person. So I end up, and that's where I ended up in social science from working, in indigenous methodologies. And indigenous science. It just, for me, it's natural now to cultivate a genuine interest in these other aspects of the field. And I could happily walk into any of those if they'd have me. I mean, I'm a dangerous amateur in social science. I have no business. But, those are sorts of areas which I've found of equal interest. So I think that's the thing, which is don't be afraid to dabble and find what those professional forums are where there's enough overlap in your interests that you might be able to initiate a mentor across computer science. I'm mentoring 2 petroleum engineers at the moment. And it's really interesting to me because we have no overlap, right, in our career paths. But I'm learning as much from them, right, and the way they think in their engineering fields and in the industry as they are from me. That's why mentoring is such a good thing. I don't know if that
Yeah.
answers your question, Michelle. I tried.
No, that does. No, that was great. And I just wanted to add an anecdote for anyone if you wanted to understand Jess's curiosity. So I met her when she was visiting South Africa and she came to the Southern African Astronomical Observatory. And they have a museum there, and it's full of all these little old gadgets and things. And so we had a little tour group, and they're trying to hurry us along. Jess was always at the end of the group and looking at all the things. So that curiosity is just really clear, and I think it's really clear in how you made your career such a success and how it all everything builds on everything else, even though it seems so broad. So yeah, thank you.
Oh, she's very polite. I was a menace during that tour. I'm a menace. All of my tours are like half an hour long because I'm too busy taking up stuff and asking too many stuff. Thank
It's
you.
great. Thanks, Jess. Thanks.
So I think some hands that I think there are some questions. I think the first one is Panibeni, if you would like to
One
unmute.
second. Yeah. Good evening, everybody. I'm Dr. Panivini from Purna Pragna Institute of Scientific Research in Bangalore, India. It was very interesting talk. Enjoyed very much. And I admire that the speaker was very talented, multitasking and things like that. I would like to know more about the research work that she has carried out in Antarctica. Maybe if not in this talk, but maybe probably in the next talk that you are going to arrange or something like that.
Happy to do so. Yeah, I think it's the Antarctic work that had two aspects of it. Of course, when I was first down there, we were trying to. My job was to test the atmosphere, and we were trying to figure out how good the site was. And then we started to move into now, of course, the South Pole Telescope is there, and the primary science which is being done from the Antarctic Plateau is in the submillimeter. And I got any submillimeter astronomers here? The thing with submillimeter that's interesting is you don't care about the daylight. You don't care about how dark it is. You care about how dry it is. And the Antarctic Plateau is the driest desert on the planet. So there's about 3 places on the Earth where you can go and get as dry as you get down there. And so most of the astronomy that is being done is molecular astronomy in the submillimeter, things that you might be familiar with, ALMA. And also still CMB, that they're chasing those B modes of the magnetic field. And the final one, of course, which is the one that I've been more recently involved in, is the SPT, South Pole Telescope, is a critical anchor point for imaging of these black holes in the submillimeter. And so I think of the results which the South Pole Telescope has produced, of course, that's probably the most well known. But I would also say the Antarctic Plateau is underutilized for science. When we're at South Pole Station, we're only at 2,800 meters. At the highest point, which is Dome A, you're over 5,000 meters. So you are literally basically in space without any.
And it has 48 hours of continuous sun, right? 2 days of uninterrupted.
You have a 24-hour dark or a 24-hour a night at South Pole anyway. But yeah, you have the you can do continuous monitoring as long as you can see it. So there's a lot of good things there. And I would actually say, just in general, yes, I could give a whole talk on the Antarctic astronomy, but we could be doing more in the Antarctic in astronomy. I think that would be sort of my summary for the moment.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Would be Clara. Please ask your question.
Hi, hello everyone. Sorry, my voice is not great today. Hi, Jessica. Great talk. Very inspiring. I wanted to ask, I am right now looking for a PhD, and I also have a multi-background career. I am actually, my bachelor's is in chemistry. I am working at ExxonMobil, so my curriculum is all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
How did you convince, especially because you said you were the first of doing many things, how did you convince this bunch of academics that a multicultural background is a good thing?
Yeah.
Because I know it is. And I know that my experiences make me a different than most people that are just studying. I had to deal with people, which is harder sometimes. But I'm having a really rough time trying to convince people to hear me out because of this background that is not all study, all physics.
No, I don't disagree. It is a trick. I mean, I was lucky in the sense that I stumbled across instrument guys, right? So I just happened to be someone who grew up out bush, and I knew how to put together antennas and radio stuff, and technical stuff interested me, and they saw that, right? And they harnessed the fact that I wasn't interested in that traditional academic path. That's what they were looking for. So you have to look for these groups that are working on those boundaries, right? The ones who are in the instrument, have they got a lab? Are they building a telescope for an instrument, or for an instrument for a telescope? Go to the observatories and follow the scientists who've already similarly gone out of this path and see where their PhDs that they're making are coming from. And it's pretty, well, not easy, but it's an easy research assignment to go and look across the astronomy groups in the world. Where are these labs? Who is building this stuff, right? Who will understand that you coming in, with a chemistry background? And I mean, astrochemistry, the labs in Cambridge, you can do these things, and they'll be looking for people like you, right? Because they don't have to explain this stuff. And if there are many problems with astronomers, but one of the problems with astronomers is we like to think we know everything about everything, and reinvent wheels that do not need reinvention. And whereas actually it'd be like, instead of starting in astronomy and wandering into chemistry, why don't we just get a chemist and teach her astronomy? So there are people out there who understand these expertise, and bringing them in is really valuable. And so you do just need to do that research. And that's where things like the SBIE conference, you're just going to have 2,000 people like that. And
Okay.
that's why going to these, and they have a whole exhibition hall just of industry who are liaising with the telescopes. So those are that's when these sorts of workshops and conferences, which are sort of more into industry but blend into academia, might be the place that you might want to go to see, because then you're going to get people who understand that you bringing in this additional, not different, additional capabilities is really valuable.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Thank you.
Can I add something to that? I think that was perfect advice. But I also, because I've been thinking about this quite recently, because I hire, postdocs, etc., and I'm in machine learning, and it's a new enough field that it's quite difficult to get someone who's got years of machine learning experience, right? So very often I'll take someone who I think is capable, and they're going to have to learn the field quite quickly, which is what I did in my postdoc. I moved to quite a different field. And I've realized that a lot of people really struggle with that. A lot of people are more comfortable with being very narrow and very focused. And there are sometimes PhD or postdoc opportunities where they want you to be very narrow and focused and to stay in that same field. But there are, exactly like Jess was saying, there's other fields, for instance, like mine, which are perhaps new or a bit different, or they're actually looking for someone who can learn quickly. And if you've moved fields, you've demonstrated that you can learn quickly, because otherwise you wouldn't be successful in it. So, in your cover letter, for instance, I think you should highlight that. And it's exactly what you're saying, that for some groups, that's not going to be what they're looking for. But for other groups, that's going to be exactly what they're looking for, that they need someone who's smart and agile and able to be quite broad and synthesize a lot of different fields. So that's how you kind of present it as a strength, at least, if I read that cover letter, I'd be interested. So
thank you, Michelle. Yeah, I'll take everything in consideration. I'll keep trying, right?
So thank you for the questions. Also, we have, I think, another one, Christian.
Hi.
Are you there?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Please.
I loved your talk, Jessica. I think one of the things that I found so sort of inspirational from it was how you said you sort of managed to harness this sort of male trait of being really headstrong and saying sort of, okay, cool, if you say no to me, I don't really care. I'm going to want to do what I do anyway, and I'm going to carry on doing it. But at the same time, you sort of said, like, trying to downplay that side of yourself. But I mean, I really love that side, and the fact that you can now sort of, what's the word, sort of dual wield, I suppose, the fact that you have this really headstrong male side and this sort of really feminine side of always trying to help the younger generation, which I think is, yeah, I think that would be the most inspiring thing. Because I mean, most of the women I've seen in this field that have gotten really far in their careers, it's so amazing to see how many of them at that point in their career sort of turn and go, okay, now I need to make it better because the way I came up was not great. And I'm going to fix that for the younger generation. So it's like, yeah, it's cool to see that you can have both sides. Like you can be this feminine side and actually be caring and helpful towards the people you're working with and be understanding of their lives and situations. But at the same time, also have this extremely headstrong side of no, I will do what I'm going to do. Shame. Which is, yeah, that I really love that.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate it. I was actually just giving a workshop at Radboud at my university in well, I call it upwards leadership, but in fact, I'm sort of reframing it now in a workshop in creating your own leadership style. I actually got trained in my leadership by a bunch of military officers in the US. It was the only useful leadership training I've ever had, and it was a leadership boot camp run by ex-US military officers who'd gone into some sort of industry. And what was fascinating, it was so useful. Why? Because these guys you want to find how to lead, go to the military. This is life and death leadership, right? They learn it properly. They're practical. There's not stupid acronyms and pretty plots and all this sort of thing. It's just you have to get people to do what you need them to do in a situation where they might die, right? These are the people who ask about leadership. And one of the things that was so interesting that I learned from them was how open they were to not trying to mold you into this perfect in singular type of leadership, but going, okay, are you a big picture person? Are you a detail person? Okay, great, you're big picture. Find somebody who is a detail person, right? Lean into the things you're good at and weaponize those rather than trying to be something you're not. It was really valuable because I had to realize at that point how many, not bad habits, but certainly just singular habits that I'd been told this is the only way to lead, right? And you get especially male dominant traits, which is, they are somewhat testosterone laden. Some of them work on guys. They do not work with me. And an example is I can't get angry in a professional setting. I don't know if anyone else is like this, but my anger response is directly connected to my tear ducts. And they just start streaming. And it's as soon as a woman is crying in a room, you've lost all credibility, right? And so
Really had that exact experience of, okay, cool. Well, now your point means nothing because you're just emotional now.
you're emotional, right? And so one of the trainings I've done, and I do trainings with male leadership teams, is I literally and this is where the theater training comes in, I can cry on command. And so I will do a scene with them where I'm like, you have a crying person in your office, deal with it. This is on you as a leader. Don't you dare make this person feel in any way judged because they're having an emotional reaction. And guess what? Most people, women particularly, can function perfectly fine while tear ducts are coming out of them. So they do not suddenly get downgraded as an individual, or their choices or their decision-making capacity just because they're crying. And it's usually the man, mostly in this, sometimes women too, who is panicking when somebody's crying. So it is about, no, you're making it about them. This is you. And so for me, understanding that those male traits weren't necessary per se, and in fact, I have now got some very good examples of women who lead completely differently to me. And they actually one of them is a good friend of mine. She drives me insane because she's a bit dithery. She's a bit and she's at a table and she'll be sort of seemingly indecisive, even though she's the person meant to be in charge. And I'm sitting at the other end of the table going crazy. I just want to, can you just, make a decision? But guess what? Every man at the table wants to just help her. And she gets her way every time. She's not doing it on purpose. But that feminine quality means these men are just bending over. They would just tell me to go jump because I'm annoying them. But she manages to make her feminine quality a strength. And it's not something I would do, but I have to acknowledge that it's equally, if not more effective in some ways than, and again, she's not being manipulative. This is just how she is as a person. But despite that, or I would have said despite that, that would be a weakness. It would be if I was trying to do it, but she has managed to make it into a strength. And I don't know about anybody else, worst thing in the jobs I have now, I hate mingling. I'm actually an introvert and I'm quite shy. And so the idea of having to wander through a group of people with canapes is my idea of hell. I have like a AAA social battery. And so I will go through that room like a battering ram, and there'll be people out of my way and I'll get to the other side as fast as I can. She will wander through like the butterfly she is and leave everybody in her wake happier. She will have done 3 deals while they thought that they were being nice. And I'm just like, this is a superpower. Like, this is amazing. So, sorry, I'm rambling a bit. But the reason I wanted to bring it up is I starting to see far greater spectrum of leadership. And what we haven't allowed until now, it used to be a selection effect. Only the ball busting women survived. And I will put myself in a bit in that category. I am not wanting to create everyone in my image. What I'm hoping is we get an umbrella enough that more people who are delicate flowers, who aren't ball busters, who do lead with a bit more of that emotional vulnerability, are also allowed to be shown as leaders and authorities in the field and given enough space to do that. You think about the men in the field, they have a whole range of capabilities or lack of capabilities, and we allow those to succeed. So for me, we really will see success when you're not just seeing headstrong women. In my case, yes, I am, but people who have been able to bubble up in different ways and have those different strengths also being taken that seriously and also providing examples, particularly because I don't think we have enough examples of female leadership. And I think we can do ourselves a better service by not trying to fit just into a singular mold.
Thank you. It was amazing, all the things that you said. And I just want to ask if there is any other questions. And you can also write in the chat. And if it's not, after that, I will give the floor to Anna if she wants to say something. Please.
Well, I see that Michelle does have a question, so I will yield to her then.
I didn't have a question, but before Anna and Sabura signed off, I see we're coming up to the hour. I just wanted to thank you again, Jess. I think this was really one of the best webinars we've ever had. I wanted to point out that this is Anna's recording this, and what we do with the recording is it's on we put it on the website, which is through a login. So even though there's about 18 people here now, probably 100 people are going to watch this recording because we have members from all over the world, and I do know that a lot of people watch the recordings and gain a lot from it. So your insights are going to have a ripple effect throughout the whole foundation. So yeah, thank you so much. And I also really want to thank Sabura and Anna for organizing everything. I've got a really great team of people helping me out. So yeah, thank you. And I yield the floor to Anna. Please close off.
Sure. Thank you so much for that, Michelle. And really, I think I have to thank Sabura for organizing all of this, for the communication. And yeah, Professor, this was such an interesting and fun talk. I think this is probably as Michelle said, maybe the best seminar we've had. So I think I will even be rewatching this. Because truly, I mean, you're not just interesting, but also entertaining. So I can see why the theater background came into play here. So I mean, I would have a dozen more questions, but I think as Michelle said, we probably do have to close. So thank you so much for giving us your time and for being so open with us and giving us such great advice. So I guess I will have to close, but once more, thank you so much, and we hope that we can maybe see you again.
I hope so too. Look, all of you, keep trucking. Don't let the bastards get you down. And keep trying to find the joy in the work, yeah?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you
everyone.
so
Take care,
Bye. Have a
everyone.
great day. Thank
Yes.
you again.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Sign off. Bye.
Thanks, Anna.
My pleasure. Take care, everyone.